Let's cultivate our motivation. So we often take the fact of having a human body and a human mind for granted and forget to consider that without this human mind, it would be very difficult to generate a good motivation. So other beings in the God realm and so on have an intelligent mind, but some of them are distracted by pleasure, so a good motivation is out the window. Some are so involved in their deep states of samadhi that they're not interested in the rest of the path. And certainly the lower realms, very difficult. So while we have our intelligence and we're not senile, we don't have Alzheimer's, then let's take this opportunity to again and again implant in our mind these seeds of the aspiration for full awakening in order to be of the greatest benefit to all living beings. So we often think that planting seeds is not much of a practice, but having the real experience is. And so fault ourselves when our bodhicitta is contrived instead of completely genuine. But this reflects that we don't understand well how the mind operates, and that it's a process of familiarization that brings about the actual experiences. So we plant seeds each time we familiarize ourselves with a certain topic. So we shouldn't think of it like when you drop acid and you get an immediate experience. Practicing Dharma is quite different. It's repetition. It's planting the seeds deeper and deeper and slowly cultivating the authentic experience. And so to be happy that we can do that we have the human body and human mind, all the good conditions now to actually do that. So let's maintain that awareness in the new year and keep generating bodhicitta again and again. So last night I was reading the request letters from the people who want to take refuge, and I was very impressed with some of them, where people really opened up about their practice. And one thing that I noticed in a few of them, which I think is probably common to everybody, is that we start out the Dharma and we love it and we're practicing and we see some change. And then, we don't make it the cushion as often as we could, and we get distracted by, family and work and everything else. And so our practice goes more into the mañana and la mañana mode. I'll do it tomorrow morning. And then we feel bad. We feel like we failed. Yeah. And, yeah, and this was fairly common. Did other people have that too? I suspect. Yeah. And okay, so I failed. I'm, not doing this good enough. And this is, this is what happens. And this is why my teacher, one of my teachers, was very clear that, first of all, it's good to go to retreats a few times a year. Yeah? Because when you go to retreats, when you get yourself out of your usual environment into a Dharma environment, then it becomes easier to practice. So it's like giving yourself a booster shot. Yeah. And then the trick is when you go home to take the renewed energy and enthusiasm from your practice home with you. Don't leave it here. Okay, take it home with you and really set up a schedule that works for you in your life. Because I think very often people put the bar way too high. Yeah? Oh, I met the Dharma and now I'm going to meditate 3 hours every day. And, that just may not be very practical in your life. But because you set the bar so high, then you feel like you failed if you don't meet that. Okay? So better to set something that's practical for you, and then do it consistently. This is what is always recommended, because we tend to do a whole lot of practice for a period of time, and then, yeah. So to keep it even on a daily basis, cultivating our motivation in the morning, doing some practice or at least some Dharma reading in the morning, trying to go to teachings or listen on the web, set up something practical that you can do. If you miss it, then don't get hard on yourself. Just make sure that the next time, you do it. Yeah? And it happens. Sometimes you just like, oh, I really don't feel like going to sit on the cushion. But I find in my practice what has helped is I have made promises to my teachers to do certain practices every day. And so I do those. I may do them quickly, I may not do them so well, but I do them. And I think that kind of thing is very helpful, because I value my word. And so even if I'm sick or I don't feel well, or, I'm on a plane or whatever's going on, those things get done. Yeah. Like I said, maybe quickly, maybe not so thoroughly, but you're planting the seeds again and again and again. Okay? So that's one thing I wanted to emphasize with people. Then another is, we talked yesterday about being aware not only of the actions we've done, but the actions we've encouraged other people to do, be they virtuous or non-virtuous, rejoicing at the former, purifying the latter. And third, rejoicing at other people's non-virtue or rejoicing at their virtue. So those three things. Another thing to be aware of in our life is what groups we belong to. And this is kind of related to the previous one of what actions we rejoice at. Because when we join different groups, it's usually because that group is formed for a certain purpose. and it does a certain activity together. And so if we join that group for the purpose of the group, then we kind of automatically are approving of and rejoicing at whatever the people in that group do. So again, whether we do that action or not, because we're a member of the group formed for that purpose, then we accumulate some karma. Okay? So you can see when we come together and we form a Dharma group like this, and we meditate together and we we practice together and learn together, then the reason that this group was formed was to create virtue, was to learn the Dharma. Then we are creating karma just by virtue of belonging to this group and sharing in the good karma that the other members of the group create. Okay? So it makes sense, doesn't it? If you belong to a group for a certain purpose and, people are fulfilling that purpose, then it's in accord with your motivation and you are rejoicing, maybe not always consciously, but it's going along with your purpose for being a member of that group. And so you create merit. Similarly, if you join another group whose purpose is non-virtuous, okay, if I make an extreme example of you join a gang, and I'm not necessarily talking about inner city gangs here, there are many kinds of gangs. Yeah, don't you think? Yeah. There are gangs that form in businesses. There are gangs that form in government. There are, gangs that form in sports. Anything, we're a part of a group. And if the purpose of that quote, quote, gang is, we're going to win and we're going to destroy everybody else and we're going to get our way and so on and so forth, then we are accumulating karma by, because we're a member of that group. Okay? So that's why it's important to see what kind of groups we join and what the purpose of those groups are. Okay? It doesn't mean that we need to agree with everything the people in the group do. Okay? So, for example, we live in Washington State. Until recently, the death penalty was legal here and carried out. Now, does that mean that because we're a member of the group of citizens of Washington State, that, like it or not, we accumulate the karma of somebody being murdered in the name of justice? I use the word murder intentionally here. No, because we can be a citizen of this state and we vote against death penalty. We disapprove of it. We don't want this. We don't condone it. And so if the state kills somebody very consciously in our own mind, we are saying, I want no part of this and I don't believe this. Okay? But it's important to think consciously about that because some people, okay, the state kills somebody, they deserve it. Kind of attitude, which is not such a good one. You accumulate karma from that kind of thing. Okay? So just to be aware of that, and different groups that we belong to, and to do the best we can in whatever group to influence people in a positive way. Yeah? And so really, at your work, to avoid the kind of quote, quote, gangs that form where, your purpose is, in an office situation, you can have like rival gangs, can't you? And they're competing with each other, and everybody's trying to get the boss's favor, and maybe doing things that aren't so good. So to just, be careful about that, or be careful about joining groups where all we do is trash somebody, and criticize and get angry. So, just to be aware of that, and to try and join groups where, where people are doing virtue. And then to rejoice at those kinds of things. So, for example, this is one of the things I find very inspiring when I'm in India with a huge group of people who have gathered together for the purpose of learning the Dharma and generating bodhicitta. It's like, wow, this is a very different group than when I went to USC and O.J. Simpson was there and everybody screamed, kill, kill. I don't want to be part of that group. But, here's a group forming where people are trying to generate bodhicitta, and that's good. So I rejoice. I live on the other side of the planet, but I feel like I'm a member of that group when it forms. Okay? So that's another point I wanted to make sure people are aware of. And then another point, too, that's come up since we're doing purification is, as we've talked in the past days, sometimes we feel that suffering, when we've done something non-virtuous or unwholesome, that we need to suffer, and that the suffering, especially if we feel guilty, will purify, and how that isn't logical, okay? So we never make ourselves suffer. If suffering comes, we transform it, and we think that we're using up some negative karma and experiencing the result, and that's finishing. But we never go looking for suffering. We don't have to. It comes. Yeah. So, but what can be very startling for many people when they do a practice like Vajrasattva is that Vajrasattva is on top of your head, pouring down this blissful light and nectar. And you're supposed to feel blissful inside. And our mind goes, wait a minute, I did something not so good. I should feel suffering. What's this bliss that Vajrasattva is giving me, How come I'm there's this light and nectar, and it's filled with bliss and compassion and wisdom, and I'm supposed to feel so happy and relaxed after purifying instead of feeling guilty and bad and hating myself. So it's, to be careful of that you don't go back to the old way of seeing things and say, oh, well, Vajrasattva can't be possibly helping me purify. I can't possibly believe when Vajrasattva says, now your negativities are purified. No, I don't really believe that. And anyway, it's all imagination. Yeah. But when I hate myself, that's reality. But when Vajrasattva is forgiving me, and the message is I need to forgive myself, how come I doubt that? So it's important in your meditation, when you think of Vajrasattva, or, the Buddha, or any of these beings that you visualize, that they're looking at you with acceptance and compassion. So remember, acceptance doesn't mean what you did is okay. Acceptance just means that's the reality, and we accept that, and we're not getting in some kind of guilt trip about it. So these beings are looking at us with acceptance and also with compassion, and they want to do something to help us. So we should let them help us. Yeah? Lots of times it's like, yeah, I really wish somebody loved me unconditionally. Don't you wish for that? Yeah? I really want somebody just to love and accept me unconditionally. Then Vajrasattva does, and our mind goes, no, I can't accept that. I don't deserve it. Yeah. Yeah. And we put up a wall. So take a look at that. Yeah. Why won't we let ourselves imagine somebody accepting us and looking at us with 100% unconditional love and compassion? And how about trying to look at ourselves that way? And how about trying to look at other beings that way? Yeah. So instead of looking at others with a judgmental, critical mind, yeah, practice making it, this is part of Dharma practice, to practice looking at them as sentient beings who are suffering in samsara, who want happiness, not misery, but because they don't know the causes of happiness, they're self-sabotaging all the time. Just like me, I'm not any different. And so, let's have some compassion for myself as well as for them, and realize that we're all in the same boat here. And criticizing and judging any other people doesn't do any good to change their behavior. Yeah. So I think it's good to learn to laugh at a lot of things. Yeah. Laugh at ourselves. We want happiness and don't want suffering, and then we go out and we're quite aware that we're doing something we shouldn't do, and we do it anyway. Yeah, that happened to anybody here? Yeah, we're quite aware. There are the words right in our mouth, and we're saying, shut up, don't say that. And there they come. Yeah. Or you have your New Year's resolution, I'm going to stop smoking, I'm going to stop drinking, I'm not going to have as much sugar. And then what do you do to celebrate? You go out to drink and smoke and, have a hot fudge sundae. And the whole time feeling guilty about it. Yeah, like, oh, I just came from a retreat and she said we did that and here I am doing that. Why am I doing this? And I'm going to regret it afterwards, and it's impermanent pleasure. But, give it to me. Yeah. And to recognize we do that, don't use what I'm saying as an excuse to go ahead and do it. That's not what I'm saying. But, to recognize that sometimes we are overpowered by afflictions. And so is everybody else. And, so judging and criticizing and putting other people down doesn't do much good. It's more a thing to laugh at, I think, because it is funny, isn't it? On a certain level, it's funny in a tragic way, but I think we have to learn to laugh at ourselves and the stupidagios that we do, instead of taking ourselves so seriously. Look what I did. Yeah, I mean, our regret needs to be serious, when we regret misdeeds. I mean, it needs to be heartfelt, okay? But heartfelt doesn't mean, beating ourselves, okay? So do you believe me? Or do you think, no, she's just saying that? Yeah. But really, try practicing like that. I know for myself, it took me a while before I could even imagine in my visualizations the Buddha or Chenrezig or somebody looking at me with acceptance and compassion. It took a while to even visualize that. Yeah. Because what do? We take out all of our old authority issues and we project them on the Buddha. Yeah. So, your mother, your father, whoever was the authority figure in your life, all of a sudden, their way of talking to you or treating you, you see coming from the Buddha. At one of our monastic conferences, I spoke with one young monk, and we were talking about this kind of thing, and he was telling me, because I was saying how beneficial it is to take and keep precepts, and he said, "Oh, but I don't keep my precepts very well." And I can just see the Buddha looking at me and going, "You lazy monk, why aren't you practicing better? Get on the ball." And, this young monk said that to me, and I thought, oh my goodness. Yeah, he was taking all his authority issues, putting them right on the Buddha, and thinking that that's how the Buddha was looking at him. Whereas, and this is what I explained to him, that's the furthest thing from the Buddha's mind. Yeah? I mean, do you think the Buddha creates millions of emanations and they're all going, "You lazy person"? Yeah? I mean, come on. The Buddha has better things to do. So let's not impute that on the Buddha. And let's not impute that on other people either. Yeah, when friends give us good advice, let's listen to it, instead of instantly like this. Yeah. I was really struck when you were saying with the children how, this thing of defending oneself comes so quickly at a young age. The self-grasping, the self-centeredness, and so it's interesting to try and experiment. It's good to call this an experiment. What would happen if I didn't get defensive? What would happen if I just listened to what this person said and realized that maybe they had some wisdom and what they said was helpful to me? Yeah, because even good friends, or teachers give us advice. We don't want to hear it. But to try and say, okay, let's practice something new. Let's just sit here and listen and not go into defensive mode. And even somebody screaming at you, just listen. I don't have to get defensive. Mm-hmm. It's sound waves. That's all. Okay. Yeah?
I have a hard time with laughing at myself. Do you mean rather, is it something like letting go or being accept and compassionate towards myself? That's what you mean.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because when I read some days ago Greta Thunberg, when she has all these, fake news about herself, and she takes it with such an ease, apparently. She laughs at that.
Yeah.
And I was puzzled. How come this young woman or girl can laugh towards something like that, where others really suffer, adults suffer when such things happen.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah. So when you see that, it's such a good example that it can be done. Yeah, I mean, even when President Trump wrote this very critical tweet about her, and then I don't know if people know about it. He was saying, you're a young girl and you should, go to go to movies and chill out and go out and have some fun and go to movies and so she changed her Twitter account, her little bio, to I'm a young girl who is trying to chill out and I'm going to movies with friends. She took exactly what he was throwing at her as an insult and just made it part of her bio. Yeah. And I thought, like you, I thought, this is great. She's not deterred by this kind of stuff, whereas the people in Congress are terrified of his tweets. Yeah. I mean, they shake to the bones when they get a tweet about themselves. So, it's a good example that this can be done. And yeah, this is what we're getting at. Uh-huh.
Having lived abroad a bit, I've always taken a certain degree of responsibility for being an American. And I've always tried to understand and look at this concept of collective karma or shared karma. Mm-hmm. So in some regards, I understand in terms of the owning of the karma and your motivation. Nevertheless, it's always been a really useful motivator for action and social justice and responsibility. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, I face the same thing because I travel a lot. And in some situations, I'm quite aware of being American. And it's very true. Americans are loud. Yeah, they are loud. And in airports in other countries, I mean, the American voices, you can hear them. They're loud, yeah. Yeah. And they don't realize that they're like that. And people can be demanding. Yeah. And then, of course, our country doesn't have the best reputation in some parts of the world. Yeah. And so I try to be very clear in my own mind that I am trying to represent a different viewpoint of America. I am not representing Trump's America. Yeah. And I try to do that very clearly. I'm trying to represent the America that I was told as a child we were, even though we've never been that. Yeah, we've never been what we were taught we were in school, But I try my best to do that. And I often, in talks in other countries, I will make very clear that I don't agree with a lot of things going on in this government. And then, I mean, some people fault me when I talk about politics or when I bring up these things, and they say, you're a monastic, you shouldn't be talking about politics. And I say, I'm not talking about politics, I'm talking about ethical conduct. Yeah. And, right now my country is lacking in ethical conduct, and the president is a very good example of that. What can I say? Yeah. I don't know. You heard me on this recent tour. I said this many times. What do you think the reaction was?
Everybody laughed. Always. Resonance.
Yeah. I think some people appreciated hearing that. We had one woman from India come here, and we were talking one day, and she said, "Oh, we hear in India that everybody loves Trump." Yeah, is that what you heard? No? Okay. Good. Yeah.
It's all about how the media projects. So, unfortunately, everywhere the media plays a bigger role in the understanding of the people. So, even in my country, there are certain things that are going on which we are not happy, and just like the same way how what you said, I don't represent that part of it. So, since I am here, I know the actual reality, and I talk to people on day-to-day basis and see the things for myself. Uh, it's all about media, how it plays. That's the major thing.
Yeah. Yeah. So she was quite surprised when I said, no, there's a lot of people who don't support Trump. But you're right, it's the way the media expresses it very often. Yeah. India's having its own problems right now. Yeah, there's massive demonstrations. They're making a citizenship law, which is not so good. What?
I don't represent that part of my country.
Yeah. Right. Just like I don't represent that part of the States either. Does that answer your question okay?
I guess I still carry a little tension, even though I can intellectually understand the premise by which we don't take on karma because of our motivation. I still feel somewhat crippled by Truman's decision in terms of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, by, the shared karma of this. I mean, the very virtue or privilege that I have as a white male in this country is built on the oppression of so many people, both domestically in terms of slavery, but also internationally, and that's a heavy weight. And I, in some ways, that weight is actually very helpful for me in terms of motivating me towards a social justice lens. And I've learned not to allow it to cripple me. Nevertheless, I still feel there's a karmic responsibility on my part.
Yeah. Yeah, this is one thing I've noticed. The way society functions in countries is it's like we are held responsible for what our ancestors did. And ever since I was a child, that never made sense to me. Yeah. Why? Because, 2,000 years ago, this happened between your ancestors and my ancestors. Why now do we have to hate each other? It never made any sense to me. For me, that was in the file of adult stupid things, And it's interesting because as I travel and I read, this is the way people often feel, like you are responsible for what your ancestors did, even though you were not alive at that time, let alone had the motivation to do those things. You're being held responsible. Okay? So I reject that. Yeah. However, what you did say is because of those things happening, I have certain privilege now. Okay? That I think I need to be aware of. And yeah, the cards are not dealt equally. Yeah. And I happen to be, I was born in this country. I wasn't born in Syria. Okay. I don't feel guilty about being born here rather than in Syria. But I do realize that I have an advantage that people there don't. Yeah. And so it's part of my responsibility as somebody who believes in social justice. I don't actually like that term because I don't know what justice means. But as somebody who believes in compassion, that I should try and do what I can to equalize things. Yeah. And to stop tensions between groups as much as I can. Yeah, but I don't like when people blame me for my ancestors, and I don't like when people tell me that because my ancestors were persecuted, therefore I have to hate other people or I have to be paranoid about other people. Yeah, I very strongly rejected that as a kid. I grew up Jewish, and so, here we have a resurgence of anti-Semitism. Yeah, and I do not want to have an identity based on paranoia, based on persecution. And this was even before I became a Buddhist, when I still identified as a Jew. But even you identify as a Buddhist, the Jews still think you're Jewish. Yeah, I mean, why on Passover do they say, let my people go? They don't let you go. Yeah. They don't let you go. Yeah? I was in Israel and, asked to, I was doing some prayers for one young woman who was in a coma, and her, very religious New York Jewish brother came and said, kind of like, you're still Jewish. To me, it's like, I'm doing Buddhist prayers. Okay, you can have your opinion, but yeah. So I think we can choose our identities, and although people may put identities on us, we don't have to accept them. Yeah. And I think that's important for any kind of minority group. Because people do have prejudice and they do project wrong things on people who are members of minority groups. But just to, you don't accept that. Yeah. One guy I write to in Illinois, he's one of the inmates I write to. He's black, and we talk about these kinds of things a lot. He's very, very bright. He shouldn't be. It's a waste of human potential to have him in prison. But anyway, he was saying that, I forget exactly how he put it, but he doesn't accept the idea that other people give him rights. He says, these are my rights to start with. Yeah, we all have equal human rights. It's not other people's job to give me rights. Yeah, so of course we have legislation in this country to give rights, so you can marry whoever you want to marry, you can get a job, you're not going to be kicked out of the military if you're trans. We have legislation for all of this. But that doesn't, because people have this kind of prejudice. But he was very clear, and it's like, wait, I already have those rights. You're not the dominant class who is giving me the rights. I already have them. And I thought that was, very brilliant the way he put it. I wish I could express it how he did. Okay, that helped. So don't feel guilty. Yeah. There's enough guilt, in the world to go around. Don't add to it. Okay. So, shall we start looking at more negative things we've done? And I must say, another attitude that I think is important in this whole purification thing is when you notice your old rotten habits, don't feel despondent, but rather say, this is good that now I see it. Because this habit is what's causing me suffering. So it's like discovering a thief in your house. Yeah. When you discover a thief in your house, you're glad because now you know who's been taking all your chocolate chip cookies, and you can get rid of the guy. So instead of, like, oh, woe is me, there's a thief in my house, it's like, good, now I can do something about it. So in the same way, when we see aspects of ourselves that we don't particularly like, just say, oh, this is really good. I'm seeing it now. Now I can do something about it. Okay? So very important. Otherwise, if we don't have this awareness and practice in this way, then what do? We go back to our old habits and we make ourselves depressed. Okay? Is there any use to being depressed? Is being depressed a virtuous mental state? Is it something that the Buddha wanted us to cultivate? The Buddha taught the Dharma so that we could become depressed. Yeah. By constantly putting ourselves down and being disappointed in ourselves. Come on, give the Buddha some credit. Yeah. And so if you have that kind of habit pattern, notice it and then dispel it and recognize it's just part of the same old self-centered garbage. That's all it is. Yeah. Same old self-centered garbage. I have enough of it already. I don't need more. Thank you very much. Okay, so I have been disrespectful to my kind parents, spiritual mentors, spiritual friends, and those following the pure paths. So again, this is something we could spend a long time looking at. I have committed actions harmful to the three jewels, avoided the holy Dharma, criticized the Arya Sangha, and harmed living beings. It hurts to just even say that, to think that I've done that. But, like I said, I have to admit it. Since beginningless time, who knows what in the world I've done. As long as I have afflictions, you put me in certain situations, those afflictions can flare up. Okay, so I've committed actions harmful to the three jewels. So that goes back again to stealing from the three jewels, misusing offerings. Oh, and by the way, included in misusing offerings is if somebody gives you, let's say you're coming to the Abbey and somebody gives you a bag of tangerines and says, offer this on the altar, okay? And you have it in your car, but you're driving from out of state and you get hungry and you think, well, I'll eat a few of those tangerines and then I'll buy some more before I get to the Abbey to replace them. Sounds good? It's not. Because that person gave you these oranges, these tangerines to offer. Yeah. So you offer exactly what the person told you to offer. You don't eat it and then replace it. I think when people offer you money, sometimes when people go to Bodh Gaya, we give them money and say, please make offerings there. There, I don't think you need to keep the same bills because money is just a symbol for something else. So you see what the amount is, you translate it into rupees, and then you give that amount as offerings, however the person directed it. Okay. So harm the three jewels. In previous lives, maybe we destroyed monasteries, we destroyed stupas, we imprisoned people for their religious beliefs. This happened. What happened during the Cultural Revolution? The Buddhists in China and Tibet were really persecuted And I think of the karma some of those people created. I met some nuns when I was in China, and they were telling me that during the Cultural Revolution, I don't know how much people know about this, but many of the people had to wear like placards, that they have when they're advertising in front of a shop, and they had to wear placards, denouncing Buddhism, and wear a dunce cap, and they were made to walk through the streets so that everybody would see them and they would be humiliated. Yeah. So this was common practice during this Cultural Revolution. Really horrible stuff. And, people going into monasteries. I remember going in one wrecked up monastery in Tibet and seeing scriptures, pages from scriptures all over the floors, torn, because people went in there, they burned this stuff. And it wasn't just the Chinese soldiers who did that. There were some Tibetans who did it as well. Yeah, that's hard for the Tibetans to admit, but that's what people have told me. Okay, so we've done actions harmful to the three jewels. And, sometimes we're in a situation where we represent the Buddha Dharma. You're at a conference, or you're speaking in a public venue, then it's really important to behave well, because unfortunately and unfairly, people will judge all of Buddhism dependent on the behavior of one person. Okay? So, I've harmed the three jewels, avoided the holy Dharma. Now, we usually think when we hear the word avoid the Dharma, it's like, okay, I make excuses for not getting to the meditation cushion. I make excuses for not going to teachings. I've avoided the Dharma. Okay? That's not actually the meaning of avoiding the Dharma. The actual meaning, the way they describe it, is when we explain what should be the Dharma, but we twist it and are explaining something that we feel more comfortable with. Okay? So somebody is coming to you as a Buddhist practitioner with a question about Buddhism, and you twist your answer so that you aren't giving the actual answer that the Buddha would give, but something that you think that person wants to hear so they'll like you. Okay? Or you make yourself into a teacher, but what you're teaching isn't exactly what the Buddha taught. And this is happening a lot nowadays. Yeah. And it's happening in the name of modernizing Buddhism and getting rid of myths and things that we can't prove. It's often called secular Buddhism. Yeah. So we're not making a statement about rebirth. Yeah. We're not saying the Buddha taught it. We're not saying the Buddha didn't teach it. We're just saying that, we're agnostic regarding that. Yeah. Actually, the Buddha did teach rebirth. Mm-hmm. It's okay if that doesn't grab you, if that's hard for you to understand. That's okay. Yeah. And just acknowledge that and try and study some more and think about the reasons, showing that rebirth exists. And, keep it on the back burner, but every so often take it out and think about it. Yeah. And that's much better than just because we don't feel comfortable with rebirth, saying, therefore, the Buddha didn't teach it. Okay? So do you see what I mean? How we will, because we always want to be right, don't we? Yeah, we always want to be right. So if the philosophy isn't exactly comfortable for us, we change it so that it becomes comfortable so that we can be right. Okay? And that is very dangerous, because then we're making something up that isn't the Dharma and passing it off as the Dharma. So that's harmful to us, but it's incredibly damaging to other people. Because I've seen that people often, what sticks in their mind is some of the first things that they hear about Buddhism. And if they hear something incorrectly, then later when they meet a teacher that's teaching accurately, they think that teacher's making a mistake. Okay? So it's very important not to misrepresent the Dharma. And if we don't know the answer to a question, or we don't feel comfortable answering the question, we just say so. Yeah? Don't feel when somebody asks you a question that you need to have a superbly, fantastic answer that's going to quell all of their doubts. Say what you understand, and then say, I'm wondering about this too, and I'll go back and I'll ask some questions to my teachers, and I'll do some research, and I can come back and tell you what I found out. Okay? So really avoid making stuff up or declaring yourself to be a Buddhist teacher when you're actually teaching psychology or something else. Yeah? So it's fine. People are taking Buddhist methods, like mindfulness is the big one now. I think compassion is going to be the next big one. Okay? But you know how it is. As soon as something becomes big in our culture, then, it's like mindfulness. So mindfulness is big, and it's good for your employees because that way they'll be more productive and you can squeeze more money and time out of them. But you only say that to the bosses. To the employees, you say, oh, we care about your welfare. Okay. Yeah?
Or schools.
Yeah.
Social emotional learning, 11% increase in academic achievement.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So you teach social emotional learning, and what means it's good? 11% increase in academic achievement. Yeah. But what I value in school is children becoming good citizens and good human beings. Yeah. But now you have to couch that in, an increase in learning jet propulsion. Yeah. So, So these kinds of things are, going mainstream, and they have Buddhist roots, and that's fine, and they benefit people. When you teach them, say these things have Buddhist roots. Don't say these things are the Buddhist teachings. Yeah, because it's different. And anyway, in a multicultural country, multi-religious country like this, if you say these are the Buddhist teachings, then some people who could benefit from learning mindfulness won't come because they don't want to be converted. So it's better just to keep everything, this is something based in that tradition, but we are teaching it in a secular way without any of the philosophy of the religion. Yeah. Except mindfulness, I think some philosophy has to creep in, but by the philosophy, what I mean is emphasizing ethical conduct. So mindfulness is not just, I'm mindful that I'm really at somebody, and I'm mindful that I really want to say something horrible to them. And I'm mindful of opening my mouth, and I'm mindful of saying those belligerent words, and I'm mindful of being satisfied that I got my revenge. Okay, that's not mindfulness, okay? So it has to have this element of ethical conduct in it. Yeah, where simultaneous with being aware of, what we're thinking and feeling and so on, that we are filtering, we are monitoring our mind to make sure that it's virtuous. Okay, so, that part I think needs to be inserted in skillful, in secular mindfulness. Yeah, is it?
Yeah, I think, well, I can speak directly to C learning on this basis, and those two key components are absolutely what's distinguishing it amongst the field of social emotional learning: ethics and adherence to ethics, and then also an adherence to care or compassion. And so that's really the new iteration on the K-12 spectrum, but you're also seeing it across the board, as you've referenced directly. People are really looking to that, whether it's the work in Virginia with Thupten Jinpa or at Emory and so forth.
Good. Okay. So, avoided the holy Dharma, criticized the Arya Sangha. Okay, so the Arya Sangha, like I was saying yesterday, this is the Sangha jewel that is our object of refuge, because they are beings, be they lay or monastic, who have realized emptiness directly. Yeah. So when we criticize them, we're not appreciating their profound realization and the impact of that realization on their minds. And instead, we're evaluating their actions based on our own preferences, what we like, what we don't like, what we think is good, what we don't think is good. Yeah. And so to be very careful about that. Now, having said that, this does bring up the broader issue of when teachers misbehave. Okay? So not all teachers are Aryas, first of all. Okay? And when there's questionable behavior amongst Buddhist teachers, there's a way to talk about it where you are not disparaging the person or criticizing the Arya Sangha. You're just simply stating, this behavior happened. Yeah, it doesn't seem like it fits in with Buddhist ethics. It seems like people are being hurt and damaged by it. And we need to openly talk about this. Yeah? So you avoid covering it up by saying, well, I don't know who's an Arya and who isn't, so I'm not going to criticize anybody, except all the people I can't stand. But they're not Aryas, so I can criticize them. Yeah. So you're not sweeping it under the rug, but you're not being critical and accusatory and judging somebody. You're saying this is behavior that does not conform to what the Buddha taught. People are being disturbed and hurt by it, and we need to look at it and talk about it and have an investigation and deal with it. Okay? And you say it in that tone of voice, which is very different than criticizing people. Oh, there's that guy, and look what they're doing, and they're so corrupt, and who does he think he is? And, we knew all along that his motivations were bad, and so on and so on. Okay? Okay, criticize the Arya Sangha and harmed living beings. So, yeah, we've harmed living beings, haven't we? Yeah, through the 10 non-virtues. And so we've done things in this life. Who knows what in the world we did in previous lives. When we were in positions of power in previous lives, we may have been kind and benevolent. We may also have been vindictive and prejudiced and horrible. Who knows? But like I said yesterday, we don't know. So we confess it, we purify it anyway, and just, making a strong determination. I may have done that in the past. If I did, I have strong regret, and I really never want to do that again, to inflict that kind of harm on anybody else again. Okay? And you make a very strong determination never to do that. Yeah. So even if you haven't done it in this life, making that strong determination is very good for your mind, because it starts building a dam against the force of our afflictions to create non-virtue. So that's the wall that should be built. Okay? The wall that protects us from letting our afflictions adversely affect other living beings. Yeah. All the other walls we don't need. Okay, this wall we need.
I was thinking about that and wondering, Ryder, when you were talking about being American, and I wondered if, even though karma is a very hidden phenomenon, if we've thought about what might I have done in past lives, even though we're not sure about it, some of our misgivings about that we feel today might it not be about that knowledge that I could have done it before, which could be some of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if we use it that way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it doesn't mean that, okay, maybe he's white. Oh, I could have been that white colonialist. You also could have been, a rebel of a different race who is harming people or whatever. Yeah. So it doesn't mean that you're of the same group that you are in this lifetime.
I was wondering, how does idle talk harm living beings, you think?
It wastes our time. Yeah, it wastes our time. So we need some idle talk to connect with people in a workplace. There's a little bit of chit-chat here and there that goes on. It doesn't mean that you have to have a heavy, deep philosophical discussion. You walk into work, how are you? I mean, really? How's your spiritual path? And, it's not like that. So, how are you? So we have that, but we're aware when we're doing idle talk. And we don't use idle talk to inflate ourselves. Yeah, which is one way that we often use it, to make ourselves the center of attention, telling all of our stories, making people laugh, pontificating about how wise we are, all that kind of stuff. And so that becomes idle talk. And other people often have better things to do with their time.
I was talking about this with someone recently, and they were saying, because the criticism was, Clinton, you always want to talk about these heavy things, and I said, well, I don't want to do idle talk, but then they said, well, sometimes that's a kind of a privileged position to be in, and some people they don't, they've been taking care of the kids all day, or they've been dealing with this trauma or whatever, they can't engage in those kind of conversations that you want to have. You know, and I didn't think about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't think you need to take it as, that means you're privileged. It's just when you talk to people, you try and find what is a topic that you can both communicate about easily. Okay? So it doesn't mean that somebody's been taking care of the kids all day, so you can't talk about something meaningful. Sometimes that person may really appreciate, Yeah, if you say, "How are you?" and they go, "I'm sick of these kids screaming," and they just need to let it out somehow, and then you can offer some support. But, yeah, it's just a thing of finding the topics that we can talk with different people about. But I think having meaningful conversations is I mean, that's meaningful, yeah, and it benefits both people. But you have to do it at a time and place, and with a person that is open to that, where it's suitable.
Let me see if I can explain. I read once in a Thich Nhat Hanh's book that when we purify ourselves, we are purifying our parents and our family. So I've been wondering how that works, or if that actually happens. And that's the first question. And the second question is if we can use our family history or story to purify, like to find things to purify. If my grandfather did this and that, and I'm born in this family, maybe in a previous life I did something similar, so maybe I should purify that as well, or if that is taking on something that it's not mine.
Okay. So back to the first question, which was what? Oh, yeah, do you purify your... there's a notion that you purify 7 generations when you purify yourself. I have some doubt about that. Okay, because it seems to me, following the Buddha's teaching, a person has to have a motivation themselves for the purification to be effective. Yeah. Having said that, like in a country like Thailand, where there's a social custom of the boys becoming monks for 6 weeks or 3 months, and they say, it purifies 7 generations of the family. I think that's a skillful way of letting the parents let their sons go into the monastery for a period of time. Okay? And by the parents being happy about that and allowing that to happen, that benefits the parents. Okay. Now, about it benefiting the great-great-grandparents or the great-great-grandchildren, none of them are alive right now, I don't. Yeah. Okay. And then your second question, if you think about things that your family did, yeah, that you don't feel so good about family members having done, you can purify that in the sense of don't identify it as I'm guilty because my family member did this. But it doesn't matter whether it was my family member who did this or whether it was somebody, in another universe who did this. This is an action that I never want to be involved in. Yeah? Okay. So we're out of time. What else does it say? These and many other destructive actions I have done, we talked about that, have caused others to do, we talked about that, and have rejoiced in others doing. And then here, in short, I have created many obstacles to my own higher rebirth and liberation, and have planted countless seeds for further wanderings in cyclic existence and miserable states of being. So that last bit is like, I did all of this stuff thinking it was going to make me happy, and actually what I've done is created, cause for my own rebirth in samsara and miserable states of being. And so, of course, I regret that. Yeah. And so then, I'm going to read the next. I like the general confession. It's succinct and it's like, whoa. Now, in the presence of the spiritual mentors, the great Vajra holders, all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas who abide in the 10 directions, and the Venerable Sangha. Okay, so to everybody, you're not going to hide it. You're not going to make excuses for it. It's like they all know anyway, so I'm going to be frank and direct. I confess all these destructive actions. I will not conceal them, and I accept them as destructive. Okay, so all the rationalization, justification, blaming other people, I'm done with that. I just want to purify. I promise to refrain from doing these actions again in the future. By confessing and acknowledging them, I will attain and abide in happiness, while by not confessing and acknowledging them, true happiness will not come. Yeah? So, we can feel good about purifying and take in all that blissful light from Vajrasattva. And you can take this practice home with you. Don't think that it's just something you do at New Year's here at the Abbey. But you have a habit now. Take it home with you. Do the practice at home, And it's very beneficial. If you can do even a brief Vajrasattva every day, it's good because we create negative karma every day. Okay. So let's dedicate.